What is up, all you GBA type fans? This is Tom. I'm here bringing you guys week 4 of the GBA. This will be my team builder for Callum and the Alola Athletic. Now before we start, very nice win last week against Geo, nice 4-0. Gonna try and carry that momentum into the upcoming matches. I do think that this team now is finally starting to, gain a footing. And if it was any, recognition from the analysts, this team is gaining more of a solidarity than some of the higher quote-unquote ranked teams ahead of me in the draft analysis. Not a chip on my shoulder, just a mere observation that while this team is not sexy, nor is it, the most shocking or, stunning when you look at it on paper, it is a good team, and I'll take that for what it's worth. But this week against Callum is probably going to be, outside of Lars, this is going to be my most difficult matchup, I guess you could say, because he just has a very, very high amount of threats. And this matchup, as compared to the past 2 weeks, is very solid. It's even probably across the board. What I threaten him with pretty much equals out to what he threatens me with. So looking at his team, right off the bat, another fire-shaped hole that my team is very not well apt to deal with, and that's going to be Emboar. Emboar, being a Life Orb or Choice Banded set with its potential priority with Sucker Punch, is a huge problem for my team. Nothing really wants to take any hits from it. Nidoqueen's not going to enjoy Flare Blitzes. Neither is Vaporeon, because it can then change it right up with a Wild Charge if he has like the damage reduction berry, or he has, he's an Expert Belt, a Life Orb, doesn't matter. Emboar is going to pretty much blow back a lot of my defensive walls. And then, of course, Fighting Stab helps it out a lot. So that's a big problem. Next up, I'm going to talk about Rotom and then Excadrill, and then talk about Shaman and Tyranitar, kind of in the same light, for a reason. Rotom is probably one of the best pivot mons that is, that you could draft in this format, especially against my team, because I have to make the right predictions with both Nidoqueen and Vaporeon. If he has it in, does he go for the electric move or make the prediction? I go into Vaporeon. I could absorb the Hydro, but I don't want to take a Volt Switch. And it's going to be a lot of guessing game, because then it's also faster than both of those things. I think my team really wants to take a combination of a Water plus electric move, especially based on his, his investment that he wants to run. In addition, it can Willow, it can T-Wave, it can do a bunch of things that are just overall annoying. It can Trick, kind of like we saw with Lars when he Trick Scarfed the Porygon 2. So I pretty much just have to look at Rotom as something that I need to maintain momentum on, or ensure that I can at least keep him from Volt Switching freely all over my team. So that means keeping a Nidoqueen alive for as long as possible. Next up, we have Excadrill. The Swords Dance or the Scarf Moldbreaker set or the Sand Rush set, all of which are a threat, which, two of which are going to be a kind of a handheld set with Tyranitar if he brings it. So kind of looking at that as more of a duo than a one-on-one. But Excadrill, I have a fair amount of things to check it, but it's going to be a little difficult if it gets a Swords Dance up, especially late game. So I kind of have to keep that checked pretty much early on. Can't let it get out of hand prior to actually getting some damage off or scouting out its moveset, seeing what item it is, stuff like that. Then we have Tyranitar. While he is going to, double up on his fighting weakness if he brings both of those, he's going to have to bring Sand if he wants Excadrill to be the Sand Sweeper set. Otherwise, if I just see it standard by itself, T-Tar, it's going to be more like the Scarf set. So that's going to kind of give me an indication of how he wants to go into the match. But T-Tar is a good bring this week. It's possible coverage moves. I've always had a problem with D-Dance sets, which, if you in the CCL or even just on like random Wi-Fi battles, I've always had a problem with D-Dance. So I kind of suspect that. Same thing with Shaman, more or less in the same light. We saw last season where Shaman kind of handled my entire team, that garbage team that I drafted. And then in addition, it's a very good mon for... It's remotely underrated for being a grass type, but I think it is still better than Celebi, minus, it can't pivot. But the Combine set seems possible. It could be a Spadef set. The Sub-Leech set is always a gigantic pain in my ass, so gotta look at that as something that I need to figure out what the Shaman is before I kind of create a plan of action for it. Because if it's like an offensive set, a spec set, maybe I have a switch in, namely like a Celesteela. But things like Vaporeon, even Nidoqueen are not going to enjoy taking hits, whether it's an Earth Power or a Seed Flare or a hidden power of some nature. And overall, it's Shaman, so it's still powerful as the the all base 100 stats. Now moving down, I could see him bringing those top 5 right there, and then probably 1 or 2 of the next group. The bottom line, not so much, but the middle line, I could see maybe 1 or 2 of those. Sableye is his primary check to keeping Hitmonlee from pretty much blasting through his entire team. If you take Sableye out of the picture, he doesn't have a good switch into high jump kick or close combat, and then Mach Punch pretty much bops a lot of his fighting type weaknesses. In addition, knockoff is nice, so I have to go for knockoff if I suspect Sableye is going to come in. Aromatisse is kind of the same problem, and I have to make a choice between like Rapid Spin or Sucker Punch or Poison Jab for Aromatisse. So it's just going to be all about the team composition. How my main point to him not bringing Aromatisse is that you look at my team and I have 3 very, very solid checks, if not just straight up counters to Aromatisse, namely Celesteela, Nidoqueen, even Porygon 2, and Thundurus, because I mean, Thundurus can set up an acid plot and a switch, but he's not going to enjoy that T-Bolt, and if I ran like Sludge Wave, he's just going to get bopped. So overall, I kind of don't see Aromatisse coming, but it still is a possibility based on my team structure. He could use that in addition to stopping fighting staff from running all over his team, so just stopping Hitmonlee in general. Snorlax is a big fat pain in the ass. If it got Slack off, it would be borderline Bork, but it doesn't, thank God. Shouts to Gubs. But if it came, it would be more the bulky, maybe a curse set. Just it's Snorlax. Always got to keep that in mind, that it's not easily killable, but also one of those things that if he does bring it, fighting type, you get the idea. Next up, we have Crobat and Espeon. But while both fast, don't provide much for him this week. Crobat can U-turn, can defog, but he also has drill for that, can spin. I see it being more of a hampering than a good bring this week. Now, he could bring it to pretty much stop Gardevoir, especially if it's like a subset, because you can run Infiltrator, U-turn, the Poison move, but it doesn't help him against things like Celesteela or even Nidoqueen. So I don't necessarily like it in a traditional sense. It's funny, though, because just a little side note, if I didn't pick, double flying type and a poison type in the first 3 rounds, I actually did have my eye on Crobat based on the amount of fairies that were running around. I do like Crobat a lot. I think it's a very solid mod. And I would have picked it if I, had the capability of doing so. Finally, Espeon. It's a good psychic type, but I do have a lot of answers to it in Vaporeon and Porygon 2. And while it's fast, it is partially limited. It can calm mind, it can do stuff like that. I don't see him bringing it. And then finally, Druddigon, just really don't see him bringing that. It's just not a good bring this week. If it was there, it'd be probably a positive for me than it would be a negative for me to kind of deal with. Very slow. Don't have a lot of physical attackers. And what does threaten him is more or less Hitmonlee and Thundurus. Zydog doesn't make contact unless I go for Outrage, but he has Aromatisse and like Sableye for that. So overall, I don't see him bringing it. Bottom line, not necessarily so much. I can see the top 5. I can see 1 or 2 of the middle 3 in case he opts out of 1 from the top line. And overall, this is a very scary matchup for me and for him. This is going to come down to just what sets are we running, and how effective do they end up being, and who makes like the dumb play first, I guess is kind of the way I'm going to describe that. But hopefully I come out on top. But I'm going to go into my team right now. And unlike last 2 weeks, I guess I should say, I'm not going to be facetious about what I'm bringing because I only play Callum once. And I think, this is regular season. We're going to go back to Showdown. You're going to see it from there. So I'll be back. Alright, guys. So we're in the Team Builder. And I'm looking at the team. I'll be bringing the 1-ton waifu, Celesteela. I'll be bringing Thundurus, Nidoqueen, Vaporeon, Hitmonlee, and Gardevoir. So starting off, Celesteela comes back after, it's not so stellar showing from week 1. However, I do like this set. I think it's actually a very interesting set. It is going to be an AV, adamant, fully physical set with Flame Charge. Now, to explain this set a little bit deeper, its purpose is going to be a middle-ish / late game type sweeper, I guess, or maybe just something like a kind of a buster to pretty much break down, if not just provide big damage to a lot of his team. The 156 speed Adamant allows it to outpace a Rotom, a max speed Rotom, at +1, and then a +2 it outpaces everything, including Crobat. But, you know, pretty much max HP, a lot of, you know, a fair bit of attack, and the rest a little bit in bulk. Heavy Slam hits a majority of his team outside of, you know, Shaman and Rotom. Earthquake hits, again, Rotom, not Rotom, and Crobat. And then Seed Bomb is what I will be clicking for an incoming Rotom, but it also hits, you know, certain other things for neutral. And then Flame Charge obviously can allow me to get that +1 speed outpace Rotom. Pretty much this thing is threatened out by Rotom, as is most of my team, but overall it is a pretty decent bring. I like this over a few other things I had in mind. Thought about Porygon 2. I thought about Zydog, but the problem with Zydog is that I couldn't find a solid set for it. You know, maybe Thousand Arrows, but he could bring in certain things. I was pretty much, you know, fearing Aromatisse when it came to Zydog, and just like week 1 when Decidueye pretty much handled the Thousand Arrows set, I didn't want to have then lock myself into Outrage or then go for D-Dance and not be able to kill something. So that's kind of why I didn't bring that over this. And I can capitalize potentially on utilizing this to bring in on Shaman. You know, the AVs allow me to live, you know, super effective hits. I could take Psychic, Seed Flares. I could take, you know, immune to Earth Power. He can hit me with Hit Power Fire. In addition, I could also bring this in pretty much without a problem on things like Espeon and Aromatisse. And then Rotom, obviously I get pretty much blasted, but it's bulky enough to live hits from other things. So next up, we have Thundurus. Now this is going to be a Charty Berry set. Have a very, I am enjoying using the berries on Thundurus, mostly because it just allows me to live. But this is going to be a highly bulky Thundurus set this week. This is to live. Now I can't live a Banded Stone Edge or a Life Orb Stone Edge from a Tyranitar, but I can live a Rock Slide from an Excadrill. So that's kind of what the purpose of the Charty Berry is. It allows me to pretty much bring it in on an Earthquake, then live the next hit. Now, that does require me to hit a fucking Fuckus Blast. That's the name of it. It's either that or Fuck Blast, because when it hits, you're like, yeah! F yeah! But when you miss, you're like, fuck! So that's pretty much how I feel about that move. Hidden Power Flying, I could have ran Sludge Wave instead, but Hidden Power Flying allows me to deal with Emboar very nicely. At +2, I have the chance of knocking it out. Now, at base, I can do 46, 57%, maybe a bit more based on my investment to a very high-ish HP Emboar. So that's kind of nice. Granted, this set doesn't do much to a Spadef Rotom, doesn't do much to, you know, obviously Aromatisse, but I think with a lot of what I'm bringing, his Aromatisse to come in on this Thundurus is not very likely, because I go for if his primary switch in the first time for Thundurus is Aromatisse and I go for Nasty Plot, he's not going to enjoy that T-Bolt, he's not going to enjoy the HP flying, and overall I don't necessarily see it bring a reliable check to this set specifically. Could have ran a spec set, but I think with the ground types I didn't want to lock myself into Volt Switch. Could have ran U-Turn, but I feel like I lose valuable coverage. The 156 speed I believe is enough to outpace Rotom, because a lot of his mons are very fast. So, you know, Emboar is slow, but so is T-Tar, so is obviously Snorlax and Druddigon. But then there's no purpose for me for real. If I want to be more bulky, I'm not going to try and capitalize to be faster than Shaman, because I think it's going to be more of a bulky role this week. And obviously the Excadrill in the sand is going to outpace me. That means the Shaman is going to pace me if it's max speed, so is Espeon, so is Crobat. So just overall, I think the more HP was a better investment this week. Next up, we're going to have a Nidoqueen. This is going to be a primarily defensive Nidoqueen. And while this is not the best check to Emboar, it is my best option for Emboar, because if he goes for Flare Blitz, this thing is invested to take less than 50% from a Flare Blitz, and then I don't think I'm going to live the Earthquake afterward, but if he's Choice Banded, I can live the Flare Blitz. Obviously, I'm immune to the Wild Charge, and if he's that special Scald set, well, I'm just fucked, so it doesn't matter. So, Sludge Wave, Earth Power, Ice Beam, and Stealth Rock. Obviously, my only Stealth Rock user, but Ice Beam hits things like Shaman, it hits the Crobat, hits the Druddigon, and the Earth Power and Sludge Wave are just nice coverage for his team. Sludge Wave hits a lot of the things that then otherwise Earth Power wouldn't hit. And Shukaberry, again, is to, if I'm at a higher HP and he brings an Excadrill, and he just goes outright for Earthquake, I can live, and then I can knock it out with an Earth Power, assuming he's not like an AV set or something. So, just Spatak was thrown in there as after I added everything. The primary bulk is an HP and defense, 172 speed, I believe is to outpace a max speed. I believe it's a Jolly Emboar. Yeah, it might also be Adamant, but that's kind of the purpose of this Nidoqueen. I think it's pretty much my best option for Emboar, because everything else doesn't necessarily want to take those Flare Blitz hits, potential wild charges, sucker punches, stuff like that. So another weird set that I'm bringing this week is going to be a special defensive Vaporeon with max defense. This is to allow myself to, again, live hits from the Emboar, namely Flare Blitzes, and then to otherwise... I don't have enough speed if he's highly speed investment to outpace it, but it does ensure that he does kind of cripple himself to his own recoil, rocks and stuff. And then the Spadef is there to take a otherwise wall type Rotom, Volt Switches and Thunderbolts. Now Scald, Wish, Protect, and Heal Bell. Wish, I could obviously pass that to Celesteela, I could pass it to Nidoqueen or even Thundurus. The Heal Bell is to ensure I don't get status up the wazoo from things like Sableye or Rotom or Aromatisse or Shaman or, Glare from Druddigon. I can go on and on. Scald Burns. Basically, it's just there as a utility mon. I think this is a little bit better than Porygon 2 this week, mostly because Porygon 2, just like last week, would warrant a free switch into things like Excadrill or Conkeldurr, like last week for Emboar. It's a good option. Again, I have to run like these very obscure wall sets, namely in Vaporeon and Nidoqueen, but it allows me to have something to check or otherwise scout his sets, see his coverage, ensure that I can then have a plan of action for the next 2 turns later. And that's pretty much the point of this set, or these 2 sets, these 2 middle wall sets right here, to at least have a chance against what I think is the biggest problem against my team. Next up, we have the Pokemon that I think is actually a very big threat to his team, and that's going to be a Life Orb Reckless Hitmonlee. Now, Knockoff, Mach Punch, High Jump Kick, Rapid Spin. Rapid Spin's get rid of the rocks. I don't really feel like switching in rocks multiple times with Raigeki. Also, I don't really want to get unnecessary rocks damage on my walls or anything, essentially. Max Speed, because base 86 is Rotom, and there's no point to speed tie with a Rotom. High Jump Kick, once Sableye is gone, is pretty much just a kill for almost everything, assuming that he doesn't bring a Aromatisse. Even Crobat's not going to enjoy taking a High Jump Kick or a predicted knockoff. Espeon, same thing, it just does not have that defensive bulk. Emboar is nothing on his team wants to take these hits after Sableye goes down, so this is why I think he's pretty much has to bring the Sableye this week. Jolly, obviously to outpace Rotom. Very simple set, Life Orb. I like this, even though it's not that offensive. Finally, we have a set that I toiled with for so long. This was not fun because I was going back and forth with 2 moves, mainly either Calm Mind or Will-O-Wisp. Now here's why. You look at his team. If I get up 1 Calm Mind, if I get up 2 Calm Minds, I'm behind a sub on the right mon. I have the potential to otherwise sweep him. However, his primary switch-ins for this are both Crobat and Excadrill. So the problem comes in is that do I want to choose to put Willow on and then burn the potential Excadrill that's coming in when I'm behind a sub, or do I want to run Calm Mind so that I can potentially hit things harder on his team, things like Emboar, things like Rotom or Shaman. Nothing on his team necessarily wants to take either of those hits. Obviously, an AVT Tar can take Moonblast. However, if I get behind a sub, he switches it in. 1 Moonblast, potentially a 2nd Moonblast based on the damage output, or a switch. Overall, I like this set. I was kind of going back and forth with Will-O-Wisp or Calm Mind, and hopefully the Calm Mind does work out, because the reason I didn't bring Will-O-Wisp was if I miss the Willow behind the sub and he just breaks my sub with Excadrill, well then it was worthless as it is. I can't really do that much damage. I can Moonblast. It'll do a fair chunk of damage. Obviously, Side Shock's not going to do that much. But Crobat, if there's no reason for him not to bring Infiltrator. I don't have a lot of flinch mons. I don't have like a Togekiss or a Jirachi or something, but if he brings Infiltrator and he just goes for U-turn, he goes for Night Slash, he goes for Cross Poison, or if it's a special set, doesn't matter, and he just hits me behind the sub, then there's no point to me having the sub as it is. So the Will-O-Wisp wouldn't necessarily help because he would still outpace me. But overall, you know, and then the Will-O-Wisp also is once he knows I have it, he can just go right into Shaman and absorb that Willow, or it brings in a free switch for Emboar. Granted, he wouldn't want to bring it in against Gardevoir, but if he breaks this up first, you know, with Shaman, and then I try and Will-O-Wisp or something. This was a very hard set. This whole team was hard to make this week. So if you have any questions about this team, please leave in the comments down below. I am like nerve-sided for this team. I'm nerve-sided for this match. Hopefully it goes well. I do think I have a very solid chance. I think that both of us have to play very, very smart in order to win. We have to kind of be that one step ahead every single turn, and that's the objective for this week, for this season. Hopefully you guys enjoy, and hopefully you're all looking forward to the match tomorrow. Sorry if it's a little bit rambling. My thoughts have been a little bit scattered this week. The match will go up tomorrow around 1 o'clock. Hopefully you're all excited. I will see you all then. Have a good night.